The April 25th, 2022 regular Wasilla City Council meeting is called to order. The time is 6 p.m. Before we begin, council, please put away cell phones. If you've got any personal business to attend to during the meeting, please move for a recess. If you are participating telephonically, please mute your phone unless speaking. Also, when speaking, please state your name for those streaming the meeting. As a reminder to all attendees, this meeting is being streamed live. The camera is located directly in the back of the council chambers, right above the clock. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Sullivan Leonard.
Here.
Councilmember Graham.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Velock.
Here.
And Councilmember Rubio.
Here.
You do have a quorum, Madam Mayor. All council members are with us in council chambers except Councilmember Sullivan Leonard, who is participating telephonically.
Okay, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and then lead us.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are on to the approval of the agenda. And tonight I would like to move 2213, the Code of Ethics, from consent to new business.
Councilman Brown moved to accept the agenda with the changes. I'll second that.
Okay. And I will also add Holly to the commission and agencies report. It would be 6.3 would be the addition.
Now I move that, accept it with changes.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
I'll second as well.
It's been one of those days. Okay. Is there objection to the motion? Hearing none, the agenda is approved as amended. We are now at special orders of the day. There are 3 proclamations that I will read. The first is the City of Wasilla Proclamation recognizing May as Older Americans Month. Whereas every May, the Administration on Aging, part of the Administration for Community Living, leads our nation's observance of Older Americans Month. And whereas the City of Wasilla is stronger when people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds are included and encouraged to make their mark. And whereas our community recognizes the importance of the physical, mental, social, and emotional well-being of its citizens. And whereas the City of Wasilla acknowledges our need to create a community that provides the services and supports older Americans' need to thrive and live independently for as long as possible. And whereas our city includes a growing number of older Americans who make countless contributions to our community every day. And whereas the City of Wasilla can work to build an even better community for our older residents by planning programs that encourage independence, ensuring activities are responsive to individual needs and preferences, and increasing access to services that support aging in place. Now therefore I, Glenda D. Ledford, Mayor for the City of Wasilla, do hereby proclaim May 2022 as Older Americans Month in Wasilla and urge every resident to recognize the contributions of our older citizens, help to create an inclusive society, and join efforts to support older Americans' choices about how they age in their communities. Dated this 25th day of April 2022. Mr. Stearns, if you would come forward, please, sir. Mr. Stearns is a representative from Wassy. Yes.
Shortest speech on record.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The second one is the City of Wasilla Proclamation recognizing the 53rd Annual Professional Municipal Clerks Week. Whereas the office of the municipal clerk, a time-honored and vital part of local government, exists throughout the world. And whereas the office of the municipal clerk is the oldest among public servants. And whereas the office of the municipal clerk provides the professional link between the citizens, the local governing bodies, and agencies of government at other levels. And whereas professional municipal clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all. And whereas the professional municipal clerk serves as the information center on functions of local government and community. And whereas professional municipal clerks continually strive to improve the administration of the affairs of the office of the municipal clerk through participation in education programs, seminars, workshops, and the annual meetings of their state and international professional organizations. And whereas it is most appropriate that we recognize the accomplishments of the city municipal clerk. Now, therefore, I, Glenda D. Ledford, Mayor of the City of Wasilla, recognize the week of May 1st through May 7th, 2022 as Professional Municipal Clerks Week, and further extend appreciation to our municipal clerks, Jamie Newman, MMC, Sarah Standifer, MMC, and Benji Johnson, administrative aide to the city clerk, for the services they perform and their exemplary dedication to the City of Wasilla. Dated this 25th day of April 2022. Miss Jamie,
Yes, ma'am.
you want out front or?
Well, Sarah, why don't you, let's go up front, we'll have Sarah come in. Is that a no?
Speech.
Thank you. Second shortest speech tonight.
Okay, one more. The City of Wasilla Proclamation recognizing National Small Business Week. Whereas America's strongest economic growth in almost 40 years have been driven by the resilience of our small businesses who, despite a worldwide pandemic, continue to pioneer innovative solutions to our country's greatest challenges and create opportunities for families and workers. And whereas from the storefront shops that anchor Main Street to the high-tech startups that keep America on the cutting edge, to the small manufacturers driving our competitiveness on the global stage, small businesses are the backbone of our economy and the cornerstones of our nation's promise. And whereas when we support small business, jobs are created and local communities preserve their unique culture. And whereas because this country's 32.5 million small businesses create nearly 2 out of 3 jobs in our economy. We cannot resolve ourselves to create jobs and spur economic growth in America without discussing ways to support our entrepreneurs. And whereas the President of the United States has proclaimed National Small Business Week every year since 1963 to highlight the programs and services available to entrepreneurs through the U.S. Small Business Administration and other government agencies. And whereas City of Wasilla supports and joins in this national effort to help America's small business do what they do best, grow their business, create jobs, and ensures that our local communities remain as vibrant tomorrow as they are today. Now therefore I, Glenda D. Ledford, Mayor of the City of Wasilla, do by here proclaim May 1st through May 7th, 2022 as National Small Business Week, and urge the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants during the month of May and throughout the year. dated this 25th day of April 2022. So, any small business owners? Trust me, I've been there. Okay, we are moving on to commission and agencies reports. We begin with a report from Public Works Director Bischoff on the recent Airport Advisory Commission meeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Danielle Bischoff, Director of Public Works, to the council through Mayor Ledford. On Thursday, we held an Airport Advisory Commission meeting. The primary topic was staff update, and so filling folks in on what was going on. We had a code compliance letter go out to educate folks that we need to just have aviation-related activities in place at our airport, and letting them, helping them understand better what's coming through with that, and why we were doing that. There's an update provided as to where we're at in trying to pursue funding for the airport with all of the activity going on out there. And again, really exploring all the different avenues. Our Deputy Administrator, Ms. Nygaard, was there, and she provided an update on the governor's capital budget and what was happening with that, in and out on that monies for the airport. So I guess we'll see in the end what happens there. We provided an update. We've been updating our lease lot list. That's something that my office holds, and so just updating that, finding out the interest from different parties that have existed on that list and bringing that forward, trying to get ready for more development out there and figuring out how we best make that all work. There's been interest expressed in our air show and continuing that moving forward, so we had some discussion on that and follow-up conversation today to figure out how and what we do moving forward. There have been powered parachute activity out at the airport. I've been in touch with FAA on this issue and again provided an update to the commission as to what those what they should expect on that. And at this time, just so everyone is aware of that, is that it's tabled currently and in talks with FAA to help us figure out how to make sure that we ensure safe operations for all of our users out of the airport. We had discussion about our gates. We had gates A and D were in needs of repair. I'm happy to report that at this time they've both been repaired. But on Thursday, the status was the gate A. There were a topic brought up by a community member, an airport user, with the security issue and potential fuel thefts occurring out at the airport. The request was made and the motion passed to lock gate A until it was repaired. That was implemented on Friday, and gate A is now operational, so it's not an issue. I think those are the highlights from our meeting, and we anticipate continuing having our meetings quarterly moving forward, and really just engaging the community. There was interest from the public to understand what the process is, what we are doing moving forward, and how they're going to be engaged. And so again, the goal is to involve our community.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions from council?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Johnson.
to Danielle, thank you for your presentation. I appreciate that. Something you mentioned sparked my interest here. You said air show, but I was going through the budget and I believe, didn't we eliminate the funding for the air show, or was I incorrect?
So to Councilmember Johnson through Madam Mayor, yes, that has been taken off the budget. Troy's not even signed an agreement. The discussion, so I believe we had this conversation at one of the last meetings, and I might get some of this wrong, but the way that it was originally set up, that special commission, something like that. The special group that was set up, it sunsetted at 3 years. And so that has now sunset. And the goal was to try to get that community involvement to spearhead that forward on their own versus being subsidized by the city. So the interest, we were not getting that interest to go ahead and spearhead it moving forward, but it sounds like now that might change. So looking to do the current conversation today, it was looking at making it into a fly-in for the day, or for the weekend, versus doing an air show, and coordination with the community to figure out what Public Works can support, what we can afford to support, and really just what facilities we have already in place that we could help to facilitate that facilities. Sorry.
Thank you. I realized I put you on the spot. Thank
No
you.
problem at all. Thank you, sir.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Gray?
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Johnson, for those questions. I'm going to kind of follow up on that a little bit. You know, the airport is really a jewel in our property holdings here in the city, and I think anything we can do to support that is money well spent, even though you don't see an immediate return on that. But so for a fly-in at your discussion today and at the previous airport commission meeting, was there any discussion either by your department or by the potential organizers of a request for funding from the city? Any idea about what this might cost in addition to what is already budgeted for the airport?
So to Councilmember Graham through Mayor Ledford, that is a point of discussion. We have not had an opportunity to really follow up on where that funding lies from the previous years. So it's a follow-up question. I unfortunately don't have a specific number for you tonight.
No, that's okay. I'm just curious if that had been brought up. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any further questions?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Brown, kind of follow up on the last question. Did we set a benchmark or a date when we're going to decide? Because June is approaching fairly quickly here.
To Councilmember Brown through Mayor Ledford, so the discussion that just took place, the idea that was thrown out was Father's Day, which I believe is June 19th, but that was literally about half an hour ago in my office. And so, again, it'll have to be a follow-up so that we can figure out what we can do moving forward.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you. And now, we will move on to a report from Rochelle High School. Please state your first and last name. You got 3 minutes.
Kiara Holt.
Jaden Goldman. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, Mayor Ledford and members of City Council. We're here to present for Rochelle High School. I wanted to talk originally about our recent prom. It went very well. We had over 80 attendees and everyone had a lot of fun and it all went pretty well.
It went well.
It went well, yeah.
Our upcoming graduation preparation is going well, and we have some speakers and performers lined up. We are all very excited for summer and to enter the new chapters of our lives.
And that's about all we have to report on today. Thank you for your time.
Any questions from council?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Graham?
may I ask what day graduation is scheduled for?
The 20th.
20th of May?
May,
Yeah,
yes.
Great, thank you. And it's going to be where?
At the
Menard
Menard
Center.
Center.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now we will have a presentation or a report on Patricia Avenue from Holly, the city attorney.
Yes, I plan on providing just a very brief report today so that you have an overview of where we're headed and what we're looking at. This is an issue that the administration's been looking at for a while, and Councilman brought up some potential options and ideas we may want to explore, council may want to explore in order to address these problems. But
Ms. Wells, could I ask you to speak up a little?
sure, is this working?
Yeah,
That's
Wouldn't have to, yeah.
Be real close.
All right, I'm gonna do this because I have a feeling, is that better?
Much better, thank you.
Okay. So one of the things that we have to deal with is the city has a myriad of different definitions for institutional homes, group homes, correctional facilities. And all of these definitions do not address the situation of, say, a more short-term rental, living situation where people are given rules and structure and are monitored to some extent, but are not part of a more formal rehabilitation program. They're not part of a, there's not a correctional facility release. They're in essence living, according to the Federal Housing Act, as a family unit because of the nature of that, of their terms and of their lease, right, or of their agreement with the organization. So what we're looking at is what is the actual impact on these communities, such as, or these areas, such as Patricia Avenue, which is a residential multi-family district, as you all know. And is there a way to identify, is there a way to restrict these types of supervised living structures from being placed in these areas, especially where, and if there's not, because we're not sure of the answer to that, if that would be a violation of the Federal Housing Act. There's certainly been communities that have struggled with that, and Anchorage itself had a violation of the FHA several years back for this precise issue and had to make those corrections. We don't want to make the same mistake. You want to protect your residents who are rehabilitating and make sure that that we're complying with the law. That said, sex offenders are not a protected class, and that is one of the problems that is being reported. It's really less about the individuals engaged in rehab and more about individuals' predatory behavior. So we could not, Wasilla does not have the ability, in my legal opinion, to say prohibit sex offenders from living within its boundaries, especially not in Alaska. We have a equal protection clause. We have, more importantly, we have a right to privacy, a constitutional right to privacy. We have seen the Alaska Supreme Court use that right to privacy to ensure that individuals who are not a danger to the public are not placed on the registry for sex offenders. So that tells us that the right to privacy is something that the City Council, as you decide how to address this, is going to have to be aware of. So what we'll be looking at, we're going to look at ways to identify reasonable risks and balance those risks, and perhaps create a prohibition specifically for sex offenders in, for example, areas within a certain distance from schools. And the sex offenders would be based on those on the registry, because that analysis will already be done by the state regarding whether or not they are a danger to the public. So I don't know that I'm going to come back to you with an ordinance that's going to solve this problem, but we're going to try to come back with an ordinance that we certainly will come back with one that's lawful, and you can weigh whether or not it really addresses the concerns that council will be struggling with. The only other thing I would say is the very best place for this to be addressed is by the state of Alaska. Most states do have a prohibition regarding the location of facilities near a daycare facility or a school. Almost all of them. Alaska and Hawaii do not have that, and so it is unfortunate, because that basic radius, which is usually 500 feet to 1,000 feet, depending on the state, really does provide some protections for residences. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes.
Madam Mayor, sorry.
Madam Mayor?
Okay, she is on, okay.
Go ahead, Colleen.
Madam Mayor? Yes, this is Councilmember Sullivan Leonard.
thank you, Holly, for presenting this. You and I have had a chance to talk on this, and I'm just trying to see, as we look at what a perimeter may look like with regard to housing for sex offenders. They've talked about schools, they've talked about daycares, but they haven't talked about students that are homeschooled. And homeschooling is something that's come up more and more, especially during the pandemic. And Matsu certainly has quite a few homeschoolers. And my understanding is that in that particular neighborhood, there are children that are homeschooled. And so I wonder if that would come under the umbrella of a private school.
My first thought is that that would be too broad, because it would, in essence, if you had a homeschool prohibition in a state like Alaska, and given our number of homeschool students, you're really prohibiting individuals who are on the sex offender registry from being anywhere, because we'd have to monitor where those homeschool students are. We'd have to determine how to apply that. So I think they usually are looking at facilities that we can, so daycare facilities, often in faith-based organizations often have daycare facilities and programs. So that's how when the states use the definition for daycare facilities and childcare facilities, that includes organizations as well. That's a pretty broad application, and in the state of Alaska, I think going broader than that would be a problem. And these other states do not have a constitutional right to privacy, and that is a formidable hurdle if anybody's trying to.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Madam Mayor, to the attorney, thank you. I appreciate your comments. I'm going to speak with my own opinion on this subject. It is not necessarily, I think, my own opinion that we have a prohibition. Certainly people have the right to live within a community. My objection in this particular case is when we start to create an institution, which is really what we have done in this particular case, is to create a business which is offering their services almost exclusively to sex offenders, and then placing that particular, I'm going to call it a business because the person who is doing the renting is probably a business or a LLC of some sort, where we have a high concentration of people being put into our communities. I believe that we should be able to find a way of limiting those kind of business applications who's really targeting their clientele to those people. Because right now it seems as though, if the reports are true, there's nowhere else for these people to really go except for the fact that somebody has decided to create a public housing for these people and are marketing to these individuals in quantity. That's the quantity that I really have a problem with. Thank you.
The only thing I would say is the organization has less, it meets the definition of family regarding the amount of people that it has at the residence. And what we're looking at, because the level of oversight and the level of supervision where you'll be required to take classes, there may be a curfew, there's rules you have to follow, you have to have a job, all of these things are laid out. We think that there is room here to create another definition of a type of assisted living facility, in essence, that embraces short-term and long-term assisted living that does not provide rehabilitative services to a protected class. So we're not providing drug rehabilitation classes or group sessions to individuals, right? Because that is not provided here. So that would be a different type of institution or group home, but it would be different than what we have now. And it may be appropriate and very reasonable to prohibit sex offenders from being placed in that type. We'll call it a supervised living residence. you know, and so it may be appropriate to put that prohibition against sex offenders on that residence. However, even if that is done, because they have, they'll be open to people who are subject to other protections. What we're looking at is we have to make sure that there is a place for those group homes or those residences, right, to go. And we need to make sure that if we have individuals who are acting in the way that they move, in their parking, and the way that they interact, in their kitchen facility usage, if they are acting like a family, and they're placing a burden on resources like a family, in that sense, then the FHA requires us to treat them like a family. And what that means is we must put them in the resident, or the districts that we put multi-resident. So it's just really, it comes up with this very unique area. Although I will say it is very different. I didn't see anything suggesting that they were marketing to sex offenders. I think what happens is a lot of times when you have rehabilitating, when you have individuals who are in rehab, you have a high concentration of sex offenders. But I think Alaska, frankly, has a very, very high concentration of sex offenders. And the registry of sex offenders in each neighborhood is pretty abhorrent, and that is a reality. So if we are in court and we're arguing what we're doing, this balance we're trying to create between harm and risk, and what we're constitutionally permitted to do, the fact that we are in a place, and I'm referring to the state as a whole, that struggles so much with these issues, will impact how reasonable our decisions are to try to zone away those issues. And that is not to minimize the challenge the council's facing. I do understand. We've been working on it. We weren't aware of the sex offender component until recently, but we were working on streamlining your group home assisted living facilities, making sure that that was taken care of. Hopefully I'll be back soon with something that you guys can sink your teeth into.
Not saying we'll look forward to it, but yes, thank you.
Holly, Mayor. Do we know this particular home, assisted living home, is it long-term? Or do they go through a rehab or transitional program and then they're out on their own? Do we know about this specific one?
I think, I would have to, can I send you an email and get back to you? I'm just not sure that the term is, that they're, I want to say it's long-term and that they enter into an agreement, but at the same time, I'm not sure that that's a requirement. So I'd rather, I'll send that to you, because I think it might be a mixture of services, but it doesn't involve services. So they don't go, they go through, when I say that, I mean they do not go through therapy, psychiatric treatment, psychological treatment, or any of those types of rehabilitation.
Supposedly they've already been through that, correct? I do know of one house, it wasn't here in Wasilla, and it was guys who had just left prison, then went to rehab, and then they were all put in this house, and they stayed there up to 3 months, and they looked for jobs. They had to pay rent, and they looked for jobs and did all that, and then they were out after 3 months. That's why I was wondering, are we gonna have turnover or?
And that type of institution or group home would fall under the definition of a correctional facility, given that it's part of their reentry into society, the way it's laid out. I think, obviously, but based on, and that means that they would be prohibited from being in their residential multifamily. So that is where we're getting, the reason why we're running into this is most facilities and institutions will require a conditional use permit at best to be in the residential multifamily. And others are excluded. But here we have the way that it's structured and the sort of more minimal assistance that has been provided really falls beneath what our current definitions would include in a institutional home or a group home. So that's why we're running into this problem on traffic Avenue and not necessarily throughout the city.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Green?
Thanks for breaking this out for us today. You've done a nice job. So, near my neighborhood, there is a private facility that does drug and alcohol rehabilitation, for men, essentially. And, I was there at the planning commission when they came in, and I go by and I see them occasionally, see how things are going. But in this case, some of them were directed by the court to find some program. It doesn't specify a program, which sounds very similar to what you're doing here. And then they pay more than a little bit of rent to be there. It's a fairly substantial cost to being there. How is this different from the home that we're talking about at this point? Do you know?
Well, generally, when you have individuals that are in a home, in essence, rehab is a component of the housing, that would qualify as a institutional home under your definitions, because there are individuals protected by the ADA. Individuals with drug and alcohol addiction and who are receiving treatment for drug and alcohol addiction are considered a protected class. So when they're in a group home that is providing those services to them, and we specifically exclude that home from one of our districts, what we're doing is potentially discriminating against a protected class. Now, if...
But the sexual offenders are not a protected class.
Right, so when we look at that, what we're looking at is can we prohibit? And so we have to balance prohibiting somebody who is a registered sex offender versus somebody who is a registered sex offender and an addict getting the treatment and rehab they need as an addict, right? So we have to balance those things when we consider them. So we can, it is done in at least one community in Alaska, but it is not done regularly. But I do believe that the city can lawfully prohibit sex offenders in certain, I think they can prohibit institutions and homes in certain districts from housing sex offenders. But this will be unusual and new, and I want to check the parameters of that as far as are we limited? If council wants to consider something like that, do they need to consider that in relation to the locations of your child care facilities? That's really what we're looking at, because it has to be reasonable. So that rehab home that you were, what district was that in?
It's in a commercial district that abuts a residential district.
So I think almost all of these, including correctional facilities, are able to be placed, obviously, in industrial and commercial. A lot of them are conditional use permits. Group homes and institutional homes require a conditional use permit to be placed in a residential multifamily.
And you mentioned that you are currently thinking of an ordinance that could be brought forward. Do you have any timing on when that might be available for the council to start to review?
I'm hoping that I expect you to have it next month, and it will be something you can consider. I know that we're trying to go as far as we can in the lane of prohibition so that council can bring that back to an area that's comfortable for council. We want to give you something that really allows you to discuss the spectrum and parameters of what you can do with the limits of your authority. Now, if we're discussing this ordinance, though, obviously this is a land use ordinance, so it would, and that would have, that planning commission would be a part of that process.
Thank you. Tom, she made up for your short speech.
Any further questions? Thank you, Holly. We are now at public participation. There are 3 ordinances scheduled for public hearing. Madam Clerk, please read the title of the first ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's ordinance serial number 2210, amending Wasilla Municipal Code Chapter 2.56, Disaster Emergency Planning by adopting Section 256-130, waiver of fees, allowing the City Council to grant the mayor authority to reduce or waive permit and application fees arising from a disaster emergency for up to 1 year after the expiration of such emergency, and this ordinance is sponsored by Councilmember Graham.
Madam Mayor, I move ordinance serial number 22-10.
We're at public
Oh,
hearing.
I'm sorry.
The public hearing on ordinance serial number 22-10 is open. Anyone who would like to testify, please come forward and begin by stating your first and last name. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Seeing no one, public hearing is closed. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance serial number 2210?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Is there a second?
Second by Councilman Johnson.
It's been moved by Councilmember Graham and seconded by Councilmember Johnson to adopt ordinance serial number 2210. Is there discussion?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you, and thanks to the staff for helping bring this forward. This is an ordinance that would allow the mayor to waive planning fees, essentially, for repairs of damage created by a natural disaster. So we recently had one of those, which was the big windstorm. So the disaster was declared by the city, and folks, even if they just wanted to have a sign repaired, or if they wanted to do some re-roofing, were required to get a permit from the city to do that. And whenever there's a permit from the city, there's a cost associated with that. So what this ordinance does is it allows folks that have suffered damage due to a natural disaster to go ahead and apply for that permit without paying a fee, as long as all they're doing is repairing the damage that was there. Now, if they decide that they want to have a garage instead of a carport, well, then obviously they're going to pay the fee associated with that. But if they're just repairing damage, then the city shouldn't be charging them a fee. The fee that the city currently charges is only $50. So even if we had, 250 people, apply for relief under this, the financial implication would be statistically insignificant to the city. You're talking probably $10,000 or less in fees being waived at the discretion of the mayor. But in these tough times, not just these tough times, but anytime there's a natural disaster that puts an economic strain on small businesses, it puts an economic strain on homeowners and even large businesses. So anything that we can do to show that we are open for business and we support businesses, and it has no negative effect on the financial status of the city, I think this is appropriate, and I ask you to vote in favor. Thank you.
Is there further discussion?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Johnson?
To Stu, did you anticipate this to be retroactive to include fees for the last windstorm?
The way the ordinance is written, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Clerk, but the way the ordinance is written, you would be able to go back in a year and waive the fees. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
I apologize, I don't have my paper packet in front of me. If you look at the IM, it gives an example. I tried to make it as clear as possible, so let me pull that up. Let's see here. So as an example, through the chair to the council, if I may, through the adoption of 2203, the council extended the emergency windstorm disaster that the mayor issued on January 5th. The extension granted by the resolution expires on April 5th of 2020. So if this ordinance is adopted, it's my understanding that a resolution may be brought forward granting the Mayor Ledford the authority to waive permit and application fees associated with that particular windstorm through April 5th of 2023. So it's 1 year after the expiration of the windstorm disaster, up until. Does that make sense? Madam Attorney, is that your understanding as well?
It is, yes.
Thank you.
That's not quite the question. I think
Okay.
I understood that part of it. We use a business who had substantial damage and is now rebuilding. They're almost complete. They've obviously already paid their waivers. Can they ask for the money back?
No.
That's really the question.
I don't believe so as currently
Okay.
written.
Is there further discussion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, please take a roll call vote on adoption of ordinance serial number 2210.
Thank you. Councilmember Sullivan Leonard?
Yes?
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Velock?
Yes.
Councilmember Rubio?
Yes.
Motion to adopt ordinance serial number 2210 passes unanimously with Councilmembers Sullivan Leonard, Graham, Johnson, Brown, Velock, and Rubio in support.
Madam Clerk, please read the title of our next ordinance scheduled for public hearing this evening.
Thank you. Ordinance serial number 2211, amending the fiscal year 2022 budget by appropriating $200,000 within the Vehicle Fund, Wasilla Police Department Patrol Division, for the purchase of 2023 Police Package Chevrolet Tahoes.
The public hearing on ordinance serial number 2211 is open. Anyone who would like to testify, please come forward and begin by stating your first and last name. Your comments are limited to 3 minutes. Hearing none, the public hearing is closed. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance serial number 2211?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Brown, I move for the acceptance of ordinance 2211.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Brown and seconded by Councilmember Velock to adopt ordinance serial number 2211. Is there discussion?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, staff, for putting this package together. I am somewhat unclear on what it is that we're doing here. The summary statement says we're looking at 6 patrol vehicles at a cost of $400,000. So $200,000 in 2022 and then moving that $200,000 forward because we are having obviously supply issues, the ability to order and receive these. But when I look through the costs involved here, first, how many vehicles are we buying? Are we buying 3 this year and then hopefully buying 3 in the following year or more if needed? And secondly, what is the total cost per vehicle of the Tahoes? The chief did send out a memo earlier on saying what the cost from the dealership is, but that's 70-75% of the cost. So what's the total cost per vehicle if we know that, or if we can estimate that?
Chief Long?
Through Mayor to Councilmember Graham, the state contract for the Tahoes is right around $41,000. And then we put about $26,000 into the vehicle with emergency equipment, the in-car video system, and so on and so forth. So that's $67,000 total about. What we're proposing to do is purchase the vehicles under the state contract, which opens May 23rd and has a very short window, and get those purchased and on their way. And then fiscal year 23, we will make the purchases for the internal equipment to outfit them with the emergency equipment.
So you're saying the total cost per vehicle is about $68,000 roughly?
Yeah, that's my memory from looking at the.
And for the little bit smaller vehicle, the Ford Explorer, the difference in price was about $2,500 from
Yes.
the factory. Is the difference in outfitting still about the same? So the end result would still be about $2,500 per vehicle difference.
That's correct.
And those are rough numbers, Troy. Don't hold me to
We actually haven't got the pricing for the 2023 Explorers yet, So we don't know, we just estimated using the current year price.
It's also my understanding that we don't have a dealer that would sell to the state at the state's contract price for 4 vehicles, is that correct?
That is what I've heard as well, and I haven't confirmed that, but.
Okay. So, if I may continue, Madam Mayor. So I have a couple of concerns here. I'm gonna vote in favor of this, don't get me wrong. I'm gonna vote in favor of this, but police chiefs or police departments across the nation are going to smaller vehicles because they're more economical to operate, they're more economical to fix. This Chevy Tahoe is a great vehicle. Thank you very much for having one out here a couple weeks ago that we could look at. And I've talked to a couple of officers and they seem to be impressed with it. But one of the things that you mentioned in the last meeting, Chief, was, well, this vehicle is pursuit rated. Well, to me, pursuit means lawsuit. I mean, when we're looking at, lawsuits against the city that come through the police department, it's excessive use of force, or it's pursuit related, where we end up with an officer who's minimally trained in pursuit and really has no ongoing training in pursuit, chasing somebody outside of our city limits. I don't think we need pursuit rated vehicles. I think a V6 is plenty. Unfortunately, with a Tahoe, a V6 would not push a Tahoe anywhere where we needed it to go. But I just don't see the need for the department to move to bigger vehicles in general. And in next fiscal year, I hope there'll be substantial discussion about remaining with the Explorer or similar vehicle. When I say Explorer, I'm just saying that's because what we're using right now doesn't have to be a Ford, it could be anything. But I'd like to see us try to remain, with smaller vehicles, which are less expensive to operate, because we do put, even though we don't put nearly as many miles on those vehicles as you would think we do, we put a lot of hours on those vehicles with the engines running, and it's just burning up gas, which, I don't know what your personal philosophy is, but I don't think it's going to get a whole lot cheaper than it is now for the next couple of years. But I am going to vote in favor of this, but I would really like to see a little bit more in-depth analysis and discussion with the chamber before the police department shifts to the philosophy that they need a bigger vehicle. I can see the state troopers using that because they operate on their own. They're often the only one there for an hour or so when they make a call, for assistance. But in the case of the Wasilla Police Department, we typically have 4 officers on the street at any one time. We have the ability to respond, to back each other up, and the amount of additional equipment. You did send that picture of one of the CERT members. Well, not everybody is a CERT member, and a matter of fact, a very small percentage are CERT members, and we can issue bigger vehicles if we need to, or have bigger vehicles available for those folks if we need to, but I don't think every officer on the street needs to have something the size of a Chevy Tahoe and with the operating expenses of something of that size. Thank you, Chief, for that, and thank you, Troy, for the information. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Is there further discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Brown?
through the mayor to the chief, there are smaller vehicles available, obviously, but I believe the reason you're getting the price you're getting because you're tying onto a state contract. If you went individually for smaller vehicles, would that affect the price from you, either Troy?
Through the council, to Simon Brown. So, absolutely. We're already seeing it on the dealerships through the supply. The ones that aren't honoring the state contract, they don't have to. They're just going right off the lot, and they are receiving and we are paying.
Okay, is there further discussion?
I could get some clarification, Madam Mayor. However, if they're buying off the state contract, they're buying off the state contract. I mean, if we're not going to typically be buying police vehicles off the lot. I mean, I know we have authorized that in the past, but there's never been anything available. But if we're looking at apples to apples, we'd be looking at, Fords or Dodges or Chevys against the contract, not against lot pricing. Is that correct?
That would be correct, but I was answering the question.
Okay, well, I just want clarification. Thank you.
Further discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please take a roll call vote on the adoption of ordinance serial number 2211.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes, although I do agree with Councilman Green.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Velock?
Yes.
Councilmember Rubio?
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan Leonard?
Yes.
The motion to adopt ordinance serial number 2211 passes unanimously with Councilmembers Sullivan Leonard, Graham, Johnson, Brown, Velock, and Rubio in support.
Madam Clerk, please read the title of the ordinance.
Thank you. Final public hearing this evening, ordinance serial number 2222, that's providing for the adoption of the annual budget for fiscal year 2023 and appropriating funds to carry out said budget. This is the first of two public hearings. This public hearing this evening will then be continued to April 27th, 2022.
The public hearing on ordinance serial number 2222 is open. Anyone would like to testify, please come forward and begin by stating your first and last name.
Good evening, James Grogan. So for the annual budget, I may be out of line here, but I'm just checking, Madam Mayor. The doesn't include the budget for the air show. That money was raised. I know that's different. Is there a way to put money back in for airport extracurricular activities for such? Does that need to be in this portion?
Troy?
Money to be put into the air show, it would be for the FY '23 period. So you're typically in June, so it'd be next June. Any money associated to this June would have to be an appropriating ordinance to come in front of council.
So not this budget.
No, sir. Okay, the public hearing on ordinance serial number 2222 remains open and is continued to April 27th, 2022 special meeting. We are now at persons to be heard. We have Mr. Stearns. Please begin your testimony by stating your first and last name. Comments are limited to 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Tom Stearns. I'm the Senior Ambassador for the Wasilla Area Seniors Incorporated. We still have board vacancies. We have 2 of them. If you know anybody that would be interested in being on our board, please get in touch with us. We have lunch every day, and there are some of you that have never been to our lunch. We invite you to come, and we'd like to give you a tour of our facility. We are increasing the number of our activities to keep seniors engaged and active. Art therapy classes have been very popular. Our dining room is also getting fuller every day with more seniors coming over to enjoy lunch. Before the pandemic, we were full. We are now more than full. And so we've got a lot of people. Older American Month, you kind of stole my thunder on that one, but what I have here is basically what the mayor said in her proclamation. And the mayor will be there. We're having a get-together on this on May 6th, and the mayor will be there, and she will probably be giving this proclamation, and Todd Smolder from the governor's office will also be there. Miles for Meals. Miles for Meals this month, we are focusing on getting support for the event, either via donations for our auction or pledges, sponsorships for the event, and it's June 25th, okay, it's the run, walk. You can do it virtually if you want, but the thing that we are going to do this year is have the barbecue, okay? So the barbecue's back, and you'll enjoy it. And please be in part of it. It's a good event, and it's community-minded. Gardening. Marlene is working on the gardening project for the Willow House. Garden planters were donated by Tote Maritime. we're utilizing volunteer labor to install, looking for manure and garden soil donations to fill. Her plan is to begin installing sometime at the end of May. Do I have any questions?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Brown?
Councilman Brown, are you planning another gardener's class?
Yes, there are going to be garden classes. In fact, they had their first one today, and they've been giving out seeds to people. They're even giving them out to the Meals on Wheels people when they take them out, and everybody's real happy with the seeds. So, anything else?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Graham?
So, Mr. Stearns, is it somehow symbolic that you're coming to the city council looking for manure?
Yep. Because we know that you guys have a big, you know everybody in the community, and so if you've got people that have this, we could use it. I put a smile on all your faces. Anything else? Thank you very much.
Mr. Stearns? Then we are moving forward to the consent agenda. Madam Clerk?
Madam Mayor, items for approval under our consent agenda this evening are the regular meeting minutes of April 11th, 2022. Under consent, we have 2 introductions, recommended public hearing date of May 9th, 2022. The first is Ordinance Serial Number 2212, amending the fiscal year 2022 youth court budget by accepting $4,120 in registration fees for the annual United Youth Courts of Alaska Conference in Wasilla, Alaska, and appropriating these funds into Mat-Su Youth Court's budget for general supplies. Secondly, Ordinance Serial Number 2214, amending the fiscal year 2022 budget by accepting and appropriating an Economic Development Administration grant in the amount of $70,000 for a comprehensive economic development strategy, or CEDS, and appropriating $70,000 from the general fund balance and transferring the funds in the amount of $70,000 to the CIP fund for the local match requirement. No resolutions, 2 action memorandums. The first is AM number 2208, contract award to Swickard, Alaska, 2 LLC in the amount of $249,930 for the purchase of 6 2023 police package Chevrolet Tahoes, and AM number 2210, contract award to Collins Construction in the amount of $105,323 for the purpose of completing the audio-visual equipment in the training room at the Wasilla Police Department. Motion to approve.
I need a motion to approve the consent agenda as read into the record.
So moved by Councilman Johnson.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
It's been moved by Councilmember Johnson, seconded by Councilmember Velock. Is there any objections?
Mayor, I don't have an objection, but could we have a quick explanation on AM 2210? I'm assuming, and I'm remiss, I didn't look this up ahead of the meeting. This is a budgeted item, is that correct, Troy? Thank you.
Any other discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, it will stand. Madam Clerk, please, we are on to communications. No, we're not. I've skipped you, Holly. I am very sorry. We're on to unfinished business. Madam Clerk, please read the title of new business.
Thank you. So we have no unfinished business this evening. First item under new business is 10.1, update from administration on emergency response efforts related to COVID-19.
There has, nothing has new happened in response to COVID-19.
Madam Mayor, if I could, are there currently any city facilities or activities that have restrictions due to COVID-19? It's my understanding that there are none at this time.
There are none.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, Madam Clerk, would you please read the,
Next item of business under new business is an ordinance, which is actually scheduled for introduction and public hearing. But first, I think we're going to hear a report from our city attorney on the Code of Ethics, Ordinance Serial number 2213, and then we'll follow. I'll read the title into the record and then hopefully be looking for a motion to introduce and set for public hearing. And then, Madam Mayor, would the council like to enter committee of the whole? And then they can maybe, if they have questions of the city attorney.
I need a motion for committee of the whole.
I move we enter the committee of the whole.
Is there a second?
Councilman Brown, second.
It was moved by Councilmember Velock and seconded by Councilmember Brown to enter committee of the whole. Is there objection? Hearing none, we are now in committee of the whole. Holly.
First, I'd like to introduce my colleague Zoe Banner. She worked really hard on this code of ethics with me, and hopefully we're getting very close to what council envisioned and what Councilmember Brown envisioned when he sponsored this project. We're pretty proud of where you guys ended up and the collaboration that you have shown on the there. So we're just going to go through this PowerPoint. Some of this is, I know that we've been through this a lot. I'm going to move quickly. All of the changes that council recommended have been incorporated, or if they haven't been incorporated, we will talk about why they haven't been incorporated. But really, for the most part, they streamlined. So the first thing that we always emphasize with the Code of Ethics is why they have a Code of Ethics. Code of Ethics are adopted not only for public confidence, ensuring that they can trust that the oaths that you take, the honesty that you agree to put in play when serving their interests, as well as your transparency with the public. A Code of Ethics makes sure that they understand the very real and tangible limitations that you're following. On the flip side of that, it allows elected officials and appointed officials and those serving the city, both also your city attorney and your clerk, to know exactly what to expect, how to conduct the decisions that we make, and it also allows for appointed officials and elected officials to get guidance when you're trying to get there. And that's really important because much of what you do is nuanced. You're balancing a legislative hat, sometimes with a quasi-judicial one. You're balancing the public's needs as a whole versus individual harms. And all of that, you have constituents coming into your office, you have, and then you have your life. You have personal, financial, faith-based, I mean, you name it, community-based interests and needs that are very real and need to be protected if you expect people to run for elections, right? They need to know that they can determine what's expected of them, that they can serve without putting those very important personal assets and values at risk. So we not only get public confidence from a code of ethics, we get a sense of loyalty from the public, and we get uniform guidance that applies both to everybody and that everybody is following, and we also get independence for the officials. So in a lot of cases, we don't care much about the purpose. It's just boilerplate, it's just language, it's just fluff, right? You'll hear it, but with the code of ethics, it really matters because it's what grounds the official subject to the code. Moving on, I mentioned this briefly, but this was something we discussed. The Code of Ethics will apply to everybody, every appointed and elected official. That means the council members, commission members, board members. It'll also apply to the city clerk and the city attorney. This is more expansive than some codes. Many don't apply to the clerk and the attorney. The attorney is subject to contract and the clerk is the same. So, but here, I think the goal of Councilmember Brown and the whole council, when we discussed it, is these are individuals that they are contracted by council, they answer to council. And so it makes sense that council has in place uniform expectations that they follow. City employees are not subject to the code of ethics, not because they're not subject to code of to ethics. They are, and it's quite the opposite. They're subject to a lot of rules and regulations, both on a federal and state front. They're subject to laws and rules under the personnel rules and regulations. And there are union contracts also that come into play. So there are a lot of pieces in play that govern both employees' rights and employees' responsibilities. And to include them in the code of ethics would complicate the expectations of the employees and the understanding of how those interplay. Because the obviously federal and state law is going to trump the code. So for the basics, my eyesight's getting a little hairy here, so. But the one thing we want to look at is what changes we're seeing in substantial financial interest. We're going to talk about conflict of interest first. That is one of the most primary components of a code of ethics, and the city has had a conflict of interest provision in its code. It's required to have that provision in its code under state law. The only difference here is we are defining substantial financial interest, which is when a conflict arises. We are streamlining definitions, which this came from council's comments for, say, family members, and with the Alaska Public Offices Commission. And so those state expectations, which was a great, I think that was a great piece of input from the council, because what it does is it once again makes sure the council understands the expectations and if the expectations are the same across agencies, that makes it easier. So the other thing that we added is we added a balancing test to substantial financial interest. And that means that now, not only do you have a number, which the number that we've used is 1,000. So we have gone down, when we were in front of you before, we were looking at 1,000 for the year, 5,000 in the aggregate. Under APOC's rules, it's 1,000, so we dropped the 5,000 in the aggregate to parallel APOC. But other than that, the definition looks, it's the same definition that came before you during our work sessions and discussions before. One of the things that's very unique about the conflict of interest provision that is in this ordinance is it has a rebuttable presumption that starts at the 1,000, right? So let me explain that better. It takes the test, the balancing test that the court will apply when it's trying to decide whether or not you have a conflict of interest. It takes that test and it puts it in your code verbatim, so you can see what you're weighing when you're determining, when the city is determining whether you have a conflict, or the mayor is reviewing that. But it then has a provision that says you're presumed to have a conflict if it's over $1,000 or over annually. So what that means is we are balancing both things. We create a rebuttable presumption. You can prove that that is in fact not a conflict based on the circumstances, and you know, we've created a mechanism for that. But so we're hoping that that provides protection and keeps council and other appointed officials. So the other thing that we have in the code is prohibited conduct. I'm gonna a little behind. So prohibited conduct is, we are laying out very specific conduct that will no longer, that will be expressly prohibited under the ethics code. Then a complaint process can be brought, and there are, penalties that will be associated with that conduct. This is two things. It not only creates accountability for the officials of the city of Wasilla, but it also prevents unnecessary and sometimes very frivolous lawsuits against the city under similar conduct that would be ordered unlawful, or that someone would accuse, that they would file a complaint to remedy. This gives them another option, and a lot of times that allows the hearing officer to take a look at whether or not that is actually a meritorious issue. I mean, and we also have built in, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we've built in layers of review to make sure that it's a very serious thing if you bring a complaint against somebody, and we want to make sure it stays confidential. We want to make sure that it's dismissed quickly and without any harm if it is frivolous, and yet we also want to make sure that there's a mechanism to enforce them. And I think I covered the changes to conflict of interest. I'm going to discuss very quickly disclosing conflicts, but then I'm going to take a breath and I'm going to check in with council, because I think before we move on to the next topic, it's best to tackle the conflicts. So, well, actually, I'll start here. Does anybody have any questions regarding the conflict of interest structure? Because we haven't really changed this substantially. So, as far as your disclosure and how decisions are made.
Madam Mayor. I have a question going back to the slide number 4, the basics here. It talks about a substantial financial interest is presumed if an official experiences a gain or loss of $1,000 in a single transaction. So to kind of back up on this here, most of our persons in Congress at the national level don't come in as wealthy individuals. However, they often leave as significantly wealthy individuals because of, not directly because of decisions that they've made, but because they're able to put all this stuff together and make it work. I mean, is that a gain or loss, or would it be better to say if an official experiences a direct and timely gain or loss of $1,000? I mean, I put something in place today that allows me to open a garbage dump 6 years from now. Is that I mean, that's me just taking advantage of what I know or what I think it might be able to do, even though I might not have proposed the ordinance with the thought of building a garbage dump 6 years from now. Do the words direct and timely fit in that sentence or not?
Well, I see where you're going. I understand the concept that you're grappling with, and I understand that. I think that when we're looking at conflict of interest, we're looking at what we think about that impacts our decision. So I don't think we put that language in because it creates ambiguity, because you won't find it in another conflict of interest provision. But for this reason, you're not going to, if you made that decision years ago and it had an impact on you, then you're not making that impact. You weren't weighing one against the other. There wasn't an interplay. There was no chance that you were going to take action based on that decision. If what you're referring to is what really happens right then, like maybe before you were a council member, you created an interest and now that interest is at play, then I think that's a conflict. So if we're really looking at, if I say yes to this, what happens to my pocketbook? If I say no to this, what happens to my pocketbook? That's what we're looking at. Is that?
Well, yeah, it helps, but yes, thank you.
Madam Attorney, I think the issue that I'm trying to get out, that I think he's trying to make is an awful lot of times when you're sitting in the council, you're actually making connections outside using the council as your platform. And these connections can then have future benefits to you. Now, would that be a conflict of interest?
Not unless you take action in your role as council, to benefit in that way, or we see evidence. If we're looking at it and we say, wait a minute, you talked to this guy, before, and now some eyewitness said that he said he'd give you $1,000 if you would throw your, but without that, no, you are fine.
Is that sort of the line that you were talking about, Stu?
Yes, it
Did
is.
I misunderstand your question?
No, but it is exactly in line, thank you.
All right, if there's nothing else on conflict, we will move forward. I think we did spend, one of our work sessions, we spent almost primarily on conflict provisions, so that is in your PowerPoint presentation, so you guys can go through and see exactly what that looks like and how it plays out. One of the things we talked about before, I'm just gonna bring up again because it's new, is the rule of necessity. And this was really thinking through a common law rule that applies already, but codifying it so the public understands it. It is very jarring if the rule of necessity comes up and the public isn't aware of it, or they don't, or you don't have anything in your code that talks about it. And what the rule of necessity is, if in small communities, we will actually come to an impasse where there are enough people on a board or commission or a council that have a conflict, and no end in sight to that conflict, and nobody with authority to substitute in for those decision makers. So these communities are then faced with either no decision is made and we're paralyzed by the situation on this topic, or we have to come up with another solution. So common law created the rule of necessity, which allows, when this happens, when certain criteria are met, right? And that is, you don't have enough people to act. There's nobody else who can act in your stead. So you couldn't, at the planning commission, for example, if council could act, that would solve the problem. Vice versa. Or say a hearing officer, which we'll get to in a minute, and there is no way to postpone or reschedule the action to a time. You can't just say, well, Councilmember Graham will be back next month. We'll just put it off 1 month. This rule has been adopted for council. In the case of the commission, we have not adopted a rule of necessity, but we have, in essence, we have not adopted the common law rule of necessity. We allow the commission to go to a hearing officer in that situation. So that gives everybody an answer. Everybody can get moving, and that's important. So let's talk a little bit about the ethics hearing procedure. There weren't a lot of changes in the hearing procedure itself from the last time that we met. And we are still looking at a procedure before a hearing officer. This procedure maintained the confidentiality provisions. Council talked a lot about that. What do we want to have it be confidential? Do we not want it to be confidential? And in essence, what would happen is an individual would see a violation or what they perceived as a violation of the code. They would file a complaint, assuming that the complaint is not against the city clerk or the city attorney. That complaint would be reviewed as to form, just basic information by the clerk, and it would then be reviewed by the city attorney for, if we assume everything in this complaint is true, do we have a violation? So what we're really looking at is that frivolity. Is this, do we have a problem here? Do we have nothing that can go forward to a hearing officer?
And Holly, I think I just discovered a typo, and I apologize for not catching this earlier, but I think if, number 3, if the city clerk, if I'm subject of the complaint, so I'm out, it'll be completed by the deputy clerk, not the deputy administrator?
Oh, you may have to, I intended it to be the deputy administrator
So
to
Crystal.
get it out of, because you don't want the,
So Crystal, I
subordinate
didn't
to-
realize that, so you. Oh.
It's like a rodeo.
Crystal and I will have a discussion.
I could see her reading it, and I thought.
But that is a good point. So what happens is if it is the city clerk, it will go to the deputy administrator because it gets it out of that department. It doesn't put, it would be very awkward, right, for.
Correct.
And in the case that it's a city attorney, you would retain outside counsel. So you would not, and that's to get it outside of the firm completely so that you're getting objective advice. When that process goes forward, so after that initial review, then it's assigned a hearing officer. The complaint is given a number. The complaint stays confidential until a determination has been made, a final decision has been made. At that point, unless the complainant asks that it remain confidential, right, because we want to protect against individuals that may want to file a complaint, have a valid complaint, but do not want that to be public. That should inform in some ways to the hearing officer's decision. So that's just a basic overview of the hearing process. One of the biggest things that we talked about was statute of limitations. How long are you as a council member or an appointed official subject to this? And we reduced it to 2 years. Before it was 5 years, which was long. And the reason why we put 2 years here for your review is often a violation won't be discovered until later. So if you are going to do, say, 1 year, then permitting a complaint after discovery, 1 year from discovery, would be fairly standard. But when we had our discussions before, one of the things that council expressed was the desire to avoid discouraging individuals from applying for appointments on commissions. And so that I could be open to a code of ethics violation, however long, out if the discovery is there, that was a fear. Council really wanted to lock that down. So we felt like 2 years, while seated, it provides some discovery period, and it also, it allows a reduced statute of limitations. So that is likely something you're going to want to discuss, because that was one that was a hot topic at our last meeting. So I think the other, let's see if there's anything here that we need to go through together before we get to the next phase. And then after penalties, I'll stop again and check in with you guys and see where we are. There may be a settlement procedure here. We maintain that that's not different from our earlier discussions. And that might include, admitting violations of the Ethics Act. But any settlement will have to be approved by the hearing officer. And that's because the interests of the complainant are of course important, but there's also the interest of the city and ensuring that the oaths are maintained and followed. One of the things that we did with sanctions, civil penalties, and remedies is we removed the ability for the hearing officer to vacate an appointment. Because when we tried to think of different ways to do that, one of the things council talked about was coming back to council. Out of all of the communities I've represented that have adopted or even considered adopting a code of ethics, it is never comfortable to be the decision maker on an ethics violation. I have not seen that work out well. And it usually results in councils or bodies asking me how fast I can get that out of their code. And the reason why is it may seem simple, but to determine whether or not someone's appointment should be vacated, they then can look to you as the person who determined they should not be sitting in that seat. So if council wants to do that, we certainly legally can do that. We can put that appointment back in, but that would be, I just want you to be aware of the way that may feel in practice in real life when we're going through that. Another thing that you're looking at is civil fines of up to $1,000 per violation. So this is probably the most significant sanction that the hearing officer may impose. This is different than, this is a result of this process, this complaint process. This is not a civil fine that would be, you're not getting cited, there's no citation, it's not going through the court system. This is just a fine that's associated with this complaint process. There is no, and this is important to note, we have not created a right of appeal. So when we as the city, as your governing body, when you create a process for administrative decision making, often you'll have a right of appeal, or if it's a property right, a right of appeal just exists under constitutional law. We did not create a right of appeal, and there's no reason for there to be a right of appeal for this these provisions, which means this is the sole remedy that would be available to someone unless there's a different, there's an ethics violation, and then on top of that, you've also committed embezzlement, right? If you've committed a crime under state statute, this certainly doesn't protect you from, or commission members, or me, or your clerk from being held accountable for that crime.
Madam Attorney, I think we've just seen and experienced a remedy which I really don't see here. Now, you talked about removal from office, okay? On the other hand, as with what happened in Palmer, I mean, wouldn't there be a better remedy to, at that point, create a special election for a recall rather than just removing the person from the seat?
That's an excellent question. So recall is a fascinating animal, and it is a constitutional animal, right? So recall has to be, the right to recall lies with the people and not the hearing officer. So she does not have, or he does not have, the ability to put recall down or a special election or vacation. Now, that said, there are some violations that, and it would be a very specific analysis, but to the extent a violation is found and that violation is disclosed, there may be some violations the city has to consider under a state statute and its own code that would require a vacating the seat. But that's going to be, that analysis is going to be somewhat completely separate from the analysis performed by the hearing officer in most cases. I don't know if that answers your question. I know you're wondering if they've done something so egregious under our code, why would they stay in office, right? I mean,
Yes.
And the answer is the people put them there, the people take them out. I guess that's the, unless they do something really, really bad.
So, I mean,
and then the state law will take them.
And we
if
do
something,
have,
I'm
sorry
sorry?
to interrupt, I'm sorry, through the chair, we do have that other provision in code about how a seat is vacated. You know, you leave the city, you're not, I'd have to pull it up, but we currently have a section in code on how the council declares a seat vacant.
And
Like
that's
you did
really,
with council seat F, then in that instance, it was because the person resigned, but part of the process was you had to accept the resignation. So anyway, we have that section in code.
and that's really important because that section in code is informed by a section of Title 29 in the state statute, which is informed by your rights as elected officials and the rights of appointed officials, although those rights are in question, to your sort of constitutional rights to your positions. So that's, that's all balanced and then reflected in your code provisions.
Madam Attorney, before you were talking about privacy and reviewing the complaint to see if it was valid, not valid as in somebody actually did something wrong, but whether it fell under one of the categories where it could be called a complaint. And then over here you have sanctions, civil penalties, and remedies. Are those publicly known, or are these private as well? Because it says the hearing officer may, impose a public or private reprimand, restriction to travel at city expense. So as far as the hearing officer is concerned, all this is a private matter that then goes to the council to determine whether or not they're going to make it public, or how does that work?
No, you want the hearing officer making that determination, because when they're weighing confidentiality, one, your code is requiring confidentiality.
Right.
Two, there are 3 other bodies of law that we will look to regarding confidentiality. And your point is a really good one, because we're looking at the constitutional right to privacy as well, right? Your hearing officers will be attorneys, they will weigh those issues, and they'll be aware of them, and so you will, because there is almost no complaint that isn't going to have elements of privacy for either the complainant or the person filing
The elected official or.
I'm sorry, the person subject to the complaint. So when you, and there's harm, there's real harm, right? There's real harm to an official who's accused of doing something that they did not do. And there's real harm to somebody being penalized or, by someone who is supposed to be acting in a certain way as a public official. So we're what you want is a hearing officer who's balancing those things and ensuring that the only things kept confidential are what are required to be kept confidential by law, and ensuring that our code creates a new category of things that are required to be kept confidential by law, which is this complaint process until the decision is made.
Thank you.
Any other questions on sanctions, civil penalties, and remedies? So one thing I just went right over, which I did not mean to do, is I did want to talk to you a little bit about prohibitions. One of the things that Councilmember Sullivan Leonard brought up, I believe, at the last meeting was the amount of gifts. That the amount of when a gift when you can accept a gift, right? When you can't, and I believe that the emphasis was on lowering that amount to make sure that you're holding yourselves to what seemed like a very reasonable number. So we put $75 in there, and we had $150 before. But APOC actually has, is it 250? Yeah, 250 as their rate. So then we now have a conundrum because council was sort of, you dropped your gift allowance substantially below the APOC amount and below what the city clerk and our office thought seemed reasonable for a nice dinner. So that is something that when you consider this next round, we're going to be looking to you to set that number. Otherwise, though, definition of family member, definition of a lot of those definitions, again, the number and conflict of interest, those all align with APOC now and should give you and I believe one thing that we talk about is the hearing office. Well, you know what, we did talk a little bit about the advisory opinions last time, but I think we came to, it didn't seem like we had a lot of unrest surrounding that process. One of the things I did add in this draft is that very clear provision for the clerk and the city attorney if they are actually the subject of the complaint. So that ensures that if you need an advisory opinion and I am not the person to give it to you, or that it's against anyone from the Birchburn, Venner, and Shiro, we would then hand it back to the clerk. And honestly, I think the way that would work is the clerk would know that, would see the complaint, and it would never come to us. We would never know it existed until we were made aware of it through the process. The last thing is this ethics code is very similar to the Open Meetings Act, as it is not designed to needlessly penalize and punish people or in any way discourage them from participating in local government. There are many, many opportunities for cure and encouragement to get advisory opinions that you can lean on and they'll be immune from prosecution or, a strong word, but from the complaint process at all. So we really tried to put that balance to infuse that. And that was, Councilmember Brown, I think, really wanted to give you a good governance tool. And good governance shouldn't scare people off. It should empower them. So that's all I have today. I don't know if there's any questions. If there's questions you want us to be ready to answer next round.
Any questions? Hearing none, I need a motion to exit the committee of the whole.
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Is there a second?
Councilman Brown, second.
Been moved by Councilmember Johnson and seconded by Councilmember Brown to exit committee of the whole. Is there objection? Hearing none, we are out of committee of the whole. Back to We are now at communications. Madam Clerk.
Actually, Madam Mayor, if I may,
Yes.
may I read the title of the ordinance into the record, and then if we could get a motion to introduce and set for public hearing, that would be
Sure.
great. Okay, so this, I think, is the longest title in history. I said that the last time, but I think this takes the cake. Ordinance Serial Number 2213, amending Wasilla Municipal Code Title II Administration by adding Chapter 201, Code of Ethics, and Chapter 2.02, Ethics Complaints, to enact a Code of Ethics and an ethics complaint process, amending Wasilla Municipal Code 276040, Duties, to authorize hearing officers to determine ethics complaints for the purpose of implementing a code of ethics and enforcement process for city officials, amending Wasilla Municipal Code 390050, conflicting interests prohibited, and Wasilla Municipal Code 390060, prohibited acts, to apply Chapter 2.01 Code of Ethics, conflict of interest definitions to employee conduct, repealing Wasilla Municipal Code 212, city officers generally, 244-100, conflict of interest, and Wasilla Municipal Code 508-200, Ethics of Contracting and Purchasing, and incorporating parts of these provisions into Chapter 2.01 Code of Ethics, and repealing Wasilla Municipal Code 514-040, Ethics and Conflicts of Interest in its entirety, and consolidating ethical rules and definitions applicable to city officers in a single chapter.
Okay.
So if I could have a motion to introduce.
Councilman Brown, move to introduce 22-13.
And set for public on May 9th. Yes, that would be great.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
It's been made by Councilmember Brown and seconded by Councilmember Graham. Is there any discussion? Hearing none.
There's no objection.
If there's no objection, so.
So we'll see that back then under public hearing on May 9th.
Okay, we are now on to communications. I've been trying to get here all night.
I am number 2204, monthly financial reports for the period ending March 31st, 2022, to include the month-to-date expenditure report, disbursements greater than 10,000, investment report, and quarterly reports of businesses receiving a penalty waiver for sales tax.
We have no commission minutes. Audience comments. Anyone in the audience that would like to address the council at this time? If so, please come forward and begin by stating your first and last name, and you got 3 minutes. Seeing none, we are moving on to mayor, clerk, attorney, and council comments. The first one is Madam Clerk.
Okay, in your last clerk's report, let's talk about budget process real quick. So we'll reconvene, the council will meet back here on this Wednesday, April 27th. We'll take second public hearing on the budget. At that point in time, a motion to adopt the budget ordinance is in order, and then amendments will be accepted from the floor. We have numerous special meetings scheduled. If we don't adopt the budget on the 27th, we have a meeting on the 28th. Also, May 2nd, May 4th, May 9th, and May 9th is our final for budget adoption. So once the budget is adopted, of course, those subsequent meetings will be canceled by the council. To date, when we released, the packet is out for Wednesday, the 27th. We had, Finance Director, did we have 7 amendments? We have today received 3 more. So tomorrow we'll be looking for an update to that packet. Anything received after tomorrow is just going to be handed out at the meeting. And so we'll go from there and see how we do. That's all I have, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Madam Attorney.
No comment.
Councilmember Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Attorney, for going through this Code of Ethics. I know it's been a couple months since we looked at it, so it's a good refresher there. So, you know, this is coming up on my favorite time of year for 2 reasons. Number one, we got a citywide cleanup, May 1st through the 7th, which is a great opportunity for all of us at any level to get out and help clean up the city, clean up the roadsides, clean up our yards, you know, clean up parks, whatever needs to be done. There are plenty of bags. I think they're yellow again this year. Plenty of yellow bags available at the clerk's office. I think there's some in Public Works as well. The dumpster will be available at Idita Park, I think on Saturday. Is it Friday and Saturday or Saturday? But the dumpster will be available at Idita Park. So you can, fill these bags and dump them at no expense to you, as well as doing a great favor for yourself, your family, and your friends and your businesses by cleaning things up. So I encourage everybody to take advantage of that. I also encourage everybody to take advantage of DEA Drug Take Back Day, which is at the end of the month here. I believe it's on the 30th.
Yes.
I believe it's on the 30th in the Fred Meyer's parking lot here in Wasilla, also in the Palmer or at the Willow Library. This is an opportunity for you, and it's actually where we beg you to look through your medicine cabinet, and we look through all the strange places in your RV where things end up packed away, and find any unused prescription medications, perhaps expired prescription medications, and they don't even have to be prescription. I mean, if you got a bunch of old Tylenol and you want to get rid of it, and you don't want to dump it down the toilet and have it end up in our sewage system, and I see Danielle's going, oh, please don't do that. Please take all this stuff to Fred Meyer. The DEA will be there. No, they're not looking to question you on where you came up with 6 gallons of morphine. They're not interested in that. They're just interested in making sure that it's properly disposed of and is taken off the streets and is no longer a danger. The reason I'm so excited about this every year when we do it is because 85%, the latest statistics I saw, 85% of youth, and when you talk about youth, persons under 25 that have suffered addiction issues, started off in their home or a relative's or a friend's medicine cabinet. That's where they found this stuff, and that's where they got started, and that's what led to them essentially losing a huge part of their life to addiction, and in some cases actually losing their life to addiction. So I beg of everybody to please take a look through your house, take a look through your trailer, take a look through your RV, take a look through your business. If you have these things, take them to Fred Meyer from 10 to 2. It's easy to spot. There'll be a uniformed police officer there, not to take pictures of you or your license plate, but to just guard the box of drugs and make sure that it's properly disposed of by the DEA. Please take advantage of that. It's very, very important to our community, and particularly here where we have such a high use or a high rate of misuse of prescription medications among the youth. When Tom was up here, he was talking about inviting everybody to lunch at WASI. If you haven't taken advantage of that, do it. WASI is a great organization, and they serve a heck of a good lunch. So, I know the mayor gets there almost every week, I think, and it's a great opportunity to interact with seniors. And when we look at seniors, think of all the knowledge that is stored at WASI. Think of the stories that can be told. Think of the ways that we can not reinvent the wheel, because they've already invented it and they know what's going on. So take a chance and go out to WASI. It's a great facility, a great organization, and enjoy lunch out there. Also wanted to thank the clerk, or not thank the clerk, but to congratulate the clerk, for the recognition today. It's important that not just the clerk, but the office of the clerk is recognized for the many things that they do, and I certainly appreciate that. And lastly, I want to talk about Veterans of Foreign Wars. We have a VFW post, the Veterans of Foreign Wars post here in Wasilla. April 22nd was their 75th anniversary, their Diamond Jubilee, as they call it. 75 years here in our community, serving our veterans, which is, our veteran service organization. So everybody thinks, well, everything in the VFW is just for veterans, but it's not. It's about the community. Every year we give tens of thousands of dollars to other community organizations and individuals, everything from high school to Boy Scouts to some of the larger organizations that are doing fundraising drives and can benefit from that. So I wanted to make sure that, number one, that in the back of our minds, we congratulate the VFW for all they've done over the last 75 years, and do our best to encourage them to continue on for another 75 years and beyond. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And also thanks to the city attorney, excellent job on explaining this and all the help you've put in, all the work you've put into this ethics ordinance. And to those who are gardeners or want to be gardeners or planning to garden, I encourage you strongly to attend the classes at Wasilla. Very educational and some great pointers on how to improve your gardening. I went last year and plan to go again this year. And that's all I have. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Sullivan Leonard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to say truly thank you to our Code of Ethics Working Group, Councilmember Brown, our clerk Jamie Newman, and our city attorney Holly Wells. I just want to say done just a really great job, and of course thank you to the rest of the council as well. It's been a long time in coming. It's something we've worked on, gosh, over the years. You know, we talked about it. We find a one-page code of ethics that we thought would work. That didn't work, and to finally come to this junction where it's finally something that's comparable. It's something that everyone can understand and emulate. I think it's a real positive step. So I did want to say thank you on that. And then also thank you and do recognize our municipal clerks and appreciate all they do. And anyway, everybody have a nice night. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Velock.
I do want to congratulate Jamie and her staff. That is a great proclamation. They're so deserving. And other than that, no comments.
Councilmember Johnson.
Madam Mayor, again, I want to thank Jamie. And I also want to thank the rest of the staff who put up with me through the day. I'm intending, just sort of as a general information seed of thought for you council people, I'm bringing forth two amendments that I just like to plant a seed. The two amendments are this. We heard public testimony on our parks and the state of affairs of things like our tennis courts and things like that. I'm bringing forth an amendment which will allow us a pot of money that we can use to be part of a matching grant for these kind of improvements. And Troy is, I think he's graciously working up the words there and the help to get that on the face. The other thing is we've heard public testimony on speed problems within the city, and I would like to ask for additional monies for signage and things with those little flashy things that say you're going too fast, you know. And again, Public Works has worked a little bit with me on that, and those are my two that I am promoting. And since I can't talk to anybody off record of it without having a code of ethics, I thought I'd plant the seed here in an open meeting. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Rubio.
I just want to thank Jamie and her staff too. And then also Holly Wells, proposed code of ethics. Good job on that.
Thank you. City Attorney, great job. Some of you may not know, but our clerk was Clerk of the Year. Was it last year?
2017, I think.
Was it that
It's
long
been
ago?
a while.
Anyway, she was Clerk of the Year, and we were extremely proud of her. So she still continues, her and her staff still continues to exemplify what a clerk is supposed to do. She keeps us out of trouble. She keeps us away from that code of ethics, you know. So thank you, Jamie, and your staff for all that you do. Also, we have, Public Works has a list of roads that are to be paved. As you all know, we have a plan that every year, these are the streets that's going to be paved, and Roberts is in that. Just so you know.
How did that happen?
I didn't bring that
How
up.
did that happen?
It's always been in there. So, having said that, thank you all for your time tonight. Appreciate it. Thank you to the staff. And I want you all to know that all these people work for me, and they've survived me so far. And with nothing further, we're adjourned at 7:55.